Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before we begin, are there any memorials? Okay, seeing none, would like to move then to the opening prayer.
Through you, Chair Kreft. As you know, over the past couple of weeks, we had the passing of Pope Francis. Good news last week with the honor of our new Pope, Pope Leo. And so we thought that we would, in the spirit of our year, Jubilee 2025, we would read the Pilgrims of Hope prayer this evening. If you can join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Father in heaven, may the faith you have given us in your Son, Jesus Christ, our brother, and the flame of charity enkindled in our hearts by the Holy Spirit, reawaken in us the blessed hope for the coming of your kingdom. May your grace transform us into tireless cultivators of the seeds of the gospel. May those seeds transform from within both humanity and the whole cosmos in the sure expectation of a new heaven and a new earth, when with the powers of evil vanquished, your glory will shine eternally. May the grace of the Jubilee reawaken in us pilgrims of hope, a yearning for the treasures of heaven. May that same grace spread the joy and peace of our Redeemer throughout the earth. To your God, eternally blessed, be glory and praise forever. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you. And now moving on to the territorial acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge that in this enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. And now we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. There are a couple of amendments that we need to do. Firstly, we're going to move item 8.2, which is the MYSP consultant. We're going to move that up and put it underneath 5.2 so that we have the superintendents with us for that portion. And also we're going to add to the 8 section, we're going to add item 8.5, update of the OCSTA resolutions. Can I get a mover of the amended agenda?
Chair Kraft, I just want to make one more tiny correction.
Okay.
On number 13 announcements, it lists the date for the SEAC meeting as May 14th. That should be corrected to May 21st.
May 21st?
May 21st.
Okay. Thank you. Can I get a mover of the amended agenda? Okay. Trustee Weiler and Trustee Guerin. Okay. We have consensus. Okay. Thank you. Now moving to the declaration of pecuniary interest. Is there any pecuniary interest from the current meeting?
I wouldn't say it's a pecuniary interest, but I'm just going to declare one just in case. One of the schools for one of the schools being mentioned for the boundary change, my daughters go to. However, none of the plans being presented affect my daughters for any of them. So just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you very much. Is there any declaration from a previous meeting? Okay. Thank you. We'll move now to the consent agenda. we need to suspend the bylaws for the approval of the minutes of April 14th, as trustee Doherty Masters was not here for that meeting. Can I get someone to move suspension of the bylaw for that? Okay, trustee Stanley and trustee Sikora, consensus? Okay, thank you very much. Can I get a mover now on those to approve those minutes, the committee of whole minutes for April 14th? Okay, trustee Sikora and trustee Weiler. Okay, consensus. Okay, thank you very much. Moving now to item 5.1, Southeast Gulf Boundary Review.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with us today are two of our three favorite planners, Jennifer and Verena. They are going to present the summary of the review that has been now completed. You will see that there are some comments in hard copy in front of you, and so these are as of today. And so those are there for your information. And I think we have one very important parent that's involved in this community sitting behind me. She's very nice and her children are affected. So Jennifer, if you're ready to go, we're ready for you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to share the recommendations of the boundary review for Southeast Galt. Just to review where we started and the public engagement schedule that was completed by the staff committee. We do have communication ongoing. We will be receiving and sharing communication with you up until the decision on the 26th of May. And as Superintendent Maharaj mentioned, there is material on your desks this evening, which was received up until Friday. Between March 5th and March 13th, there was an online survey that was open to seek input and commentary on the options that were presented in the initial boundary review report. And based on the evolution of the review process itself, a second survey was issued, which ran from April 7th to April 13th. Staff attended the three schools CSAC meetings on March 19th and 25th and spoke to parents and shared the same information as was presented in the initial boundary review report. We also hosted a drop-in open house on April 9th at Monsignor Doyle in the cafeteria to share the same information that was in the initial report, plus the addition of the option 3 scenario that was added through the process. As outlined in the report itself, and as shared in the appendices, we had 172 initial responses to the initial survey, which contains some significant concerns from families with regards to option 1, which was presented as staff's preferred alternative. There were concerns about the redirection of sub-area X from St. Vincent de Paul to St. Anne, as well as the original proposed reset of the out-of-boundary conditions within the entire review area. We did hear from families significant support for legacy exceptions, and there was just general concerns shared about the impact of school changes overall on students and families from various perspectives. As noted throughout the process, we did add a option 3 for consideration and did run a survey. We received an additional 33 comments specific to option 3, and the majority of those comments received from families were overwhelmingly supportive of option 3, which allowed sub-area 2 to remain within the St. Vincent de Paul school community. Up to the point that that the report was produced and published, we had 31 emails, and we've had a few added, which were shared with you this evening, and approximately 40 folks attended the open house who signed in on the register. So as you will recall, option 1, which was the original preferred alternative, moved sub-areas K, L, and N from Holy Spirit to the new Southeast Galt School. And to form the boundary for the new Southeast Galt School, we were also redirecting sub-area D from St. Anne. In addition, sub-area F was being directed from St. Anne to Holy Spirit, but we did note that there were no students or future development planned in that area. And then the other change, as noted, was the redirection of sub-area X from St. Vincent de Paul to St. Anne. The original report contained forecasted enrollments based on that option, which did not make any assumptions with regards to legacy exceptions or other changes, but did reflect the proposed out-of-boundary reset that was originally contemplated. For reference, option 2, as presented in the initial staff report, did also include sub-area M being directed to the new school, but sub-area N remaining with Holy Spirit, and that was the most substantive difference in the two proposals. As I said, throughout the course of the review, we heard significant concerns from families, specifically in the Birkenshaw area, which was the more southerly portion of sub-area X, around the redirection to St. Anne. And so in response to not only that feedback, but also some feedback from the St. Anne community about the structure of its school community and how it was affected by the redirection of sub-area D, we went back to the drawing board as a committee and established option 3 as an alternative. This was released to school communities via the various communication methods and shared at the public open house. It, in essence, is a modification of option 1, which contemplated splitting sub-areas X and N into 2 distinct different parts so that we could treat them differently. For sub-area X, option 3 included leaving sub-area 2 or X2 at St. Vincent de Paul and only redirecting X1 to St. Anne. And by dividing sub-area N into 2 halves, we were able to direct areas of imminent development to the new school, with future development being directed to the St. Anne boundary. So for reference on the map, I've highlighted the 2 areas in particular where the changes were made with regards to X2 remaining at St. Vincent de Paul and N2 being directed to St. Anne. The other suggested changes with regards to the direction of sub-areas, as mentioned, is the same as it was in option 1. The outcome in terms of projections is as presented on the screen in 2 parts. So we provided at the top of the screen the projection without any legacy exceptions or out-of-boundary permissions. And at the bottom, the ultimate recommended legacy exception and out-of-boundary permissions are reflected in the second set of projections. When compared against the original options, the differences is that there's largely no impact on Holy Spirit. There is a higher utilization at St. Vincent de Paul initially, and lower enrollment at St. Anne as a result of the change in the direction of sub-area X2. Over the longer term, there is slightly higher enrollment forecasted at St. Vincent de Paul during the projection period, while St. Anne would largely be sitting with a very consistent utilization. And because of the direction of N2 to St. Anne, the new Southeast Galt Schools enrollment would be slightly lower over the forecast period, but this actually provides some relief to that forecasted enrollment by 2036. In terms of the implementation details, there is a list of recommendations provided both in the covering memo and in the report itself for your consideration on May 26th. In essence, the staff committee is recommending that the Board of Trustees support the approval of option 3. All schools would become capped as of this September to new out-of-boundary requests. I will note that St. Vincent de Paul is already a capped school. It was capped in January of 2024. The proposal from staff is that we would allow existing out-of-boundary students to remain in their current schools, other than those students who would be directed to attend the new Southeast Galt School upon its opening in September of 2026. Consistent with previous boundary reviews, staff are recommending that the Board of Trustees allow grade 7 students only, a legacy exception, to remain at their current schools for grade 8 to allow them to graduate. But those same students would have the option to move to the new school if they chose to become part of the first graduating cohort from the new school. Consistently, transportation would be provided for those students opting to remain for grade 7 if they currently qualify in accordance with the transportation AP. We have had a practice for the last number of years that an extraordinary appeal process would be available, and we are recommending that same process be put in place for this review as well, such that families who believe that they have the needs of the family or the student should be considered separately and be considered outside of the out-of-boundary process, that they may make application to have their students remain in their current school. And finally, consistent with the AP and our standard processes, it is recommended that a transition planning committee be established to support not only students, but families and staff as a result of the boundary changes. Both Farine and myself would be pleased to take any questions.
Who was first? Trustee Phillips.
Just to make clear again that none of these options affect my family, and I don't have it. I'm not advocating for any one over the other, but I did have some concerns that were brought forward by parents that I wanted to clarify with you. So in the initial meeting, when you first talked about this with us, you mentioned there was 3 options. I'm sorry, this mic is really loud. You mentioned that there was 3 options, right? I remember this, and I actually documented that. And then, I'm sorry, I don't know, you want me to do it with the microphone here? So I remember I documented that. I remembered that information because I thought, it would be useful information to pass on to parents since I'm in regular contact with them. However, in the first initial meetings, they mentioned that only 2 of the options were presented to them and not 3. And that when you collected feedback, you had collected feedback and you presented it as, oh, we came up with an option 3. So I wanted to ask, what was the option 3 that you showed us, and what changes did you make that implemented their feedback if option 3 already existed? And then the other question was, since I've started, I've always been told, and I have documentation of this on several occasions, that grandfathering students in is grades 7 and 8. Now I'm only hearing 8, right? So one of the parents brought that up to me, and I was waiting for you to finish your presentation to see, but now this time you mentioned just grade 8. So why did grade 7 get eliminated? Because I think grade 7 and 8, I mean, they're almost at the end. I think that should stay. And again, my kids are nowhere close to this age, doesn't affect anything. So there's that. So yeah, I'll let you go start with that. Thank you.
Through the chair. When staff presented the initial report, we did share information about the previous school closure review and the process that resulted in a phased implementation of boundary changes that were decided around 2013 and implemented finally by 2016. What staff shared at that time is that we provided that for context and information because it was a process that had concluded and been implemented not too long ago, but needed to evaluate whether or not those boundaries that were decided at that point in time were viable. And it was determined by the staff committee that, in fact, those boundaries as a result of that previous school closure review were not viable, which is why this process was launched. So that was provided for historical context, but was never presented as an alternative for how to move forward. The only other scenario that was presented in the initial boundary review report would have been the status quo do nothing scenario. So staff presented the existing conditions if no changes were made, as we always do, to provide that context with the existing school community, and then presented the two alternatives, option 1 and option 2. Through the course of the conversations, we did acknowledge that we looked at upwards of around 7 total options. But again, because of the criteria that we were looking at, in terms of the utilization, the ability of schools to manage portable accommodation, et cetera, there were various reasons why those other scenarios fell off the table, leaving option 1 and option 2 to be presented publicly for further consideration, feedback, and input throughout this process. And then it was that input through the process that evolved the presentation of option 3.
Okay, but just to be careful, I acknowledge that your children aren't affected, but just, yeah, okay.
Concerns brought forward by parents. Now, if the option 3 wasn't viable, why was it presented to us? So I'm just curious why all the 3 options that were presented to us weren't provided at the same time if it was viable to present to us, and why did you didn't mention grades 7 and 8 for grandfathering in and just grade 8? Because one of the parents mentioned specifically that they would have chose a completely different plan had they known that their child would be allowed to go to grade 7 and be grandfathered in. So I feel that that misinformation could lead or guide them to a different choice that's not really their choice.
Through the chair, I was just speaking to the first question and the explanation around the scenarios. The option 3, as I mentioned, that was presented in response to the feedback received through the CSAC meetings and the various other methods of input, is being presented this evening as a viable option, and it was an evolution that occurred throughout the process, not something that was originally conceived by staff. With respect, Madam Chair, through you, about the legacy exception circumstances, it has been consistent practice that the board staff makes recommendations with regards to legacy exceptions for grade 7 students to remain for grade 8. To my knowledge, we have not in the last number of years contemplated legacy exceptions deeper than grade 7, recognizing that last year is something that we're sensitive to, and that has been a consistent application through the course of the last number of boundary reviews.
Are there any other questions from trustees? Trustee Weiler.
Through you, Chair. Thank you very much for a summary of the process and the final recommendations. As always, I think the revised process using CSAT committee seems to have gone very well again this time, and I would certainly ask for your feedback on that, as it is, a fairly recent change. I think the group again is to be commended for coming up with a third option. What it does is certainly shares with parents that through their feedback, the 2 preferred options do evolve many times into something different that does meet more of our students and parents' needs. So seeing that represented again here is very positive. So thank you. What I'm curious about in terms of my question is just with the preferred option 3, are there still concerns that have been trended or grouped, not necessarily just one-off, but a theme that you're still receiving around themes on this number 3?
Through the chair, thank you, Trustee Weiler, for the comments. With regards to outstanding concerns and in the feedback that was shared on your tables this evening, there are still families who, despite the change, are concerned about other boundary changes that may not have been made. So recognizing that there were decisions made at a point in time, we didn't go back and completely tear apart all of the boundaries. We didn't want to affect more students than we had to through the course of this process while establishing a boundary for the new school. But there are some families who express throughout the process and continue to share concern about how some of the other boundaries have been drawn relative to their personal proximity to one school or another. There are families who are also may not support the move to the new school based again on their own circumstances and would prefer their child or children to remain in their current school. We recognize that these individual circumstances can be distressing for families and have tried to find a balance with regards to ensuring that the new school is populated, has a robust enrollment, and is a sustainable enrollment, and recognize that that may not suit every family's interests. But I think the report and the recommendation that's being brought before you this evening tries to strike a balance and hope to be able to support families through the changes, through the other processes with our administrators and the efforts that they put in place to help families with those transitions.
Kathy, or Trustee Doherty Masters.
Jen and Verena personally too, for bringing me up to speed in my absence. They took some time to let me know all of the presentations that had gone on and honest the feedback as what parents had shared. So I appreciate that very much. This question might be more directed at Director Dowling, just because I'm curious. You know, as has mentioned, there's really significant changes for some families and staff, and it can be kind of distressing. So I'm wondering about the stability of administration with schools that experience boundary reviews, both this one and the previous one, just to help with the stability and the changeover and so on with staff and students.
Through you, Madam Chair. We always strive, especially in these situations, to maintain stability in those administrative moves. However, as I'm sure that you can appreciate with the recent number of retirements and when they occur, sometimes given the size of a school, experience of administrators, we're called upon to make those moves. In this case, all three of the current schools have a vice principal. So where possible, it's not always, we strive to, if we are moving an administrator or if an administrator retires, we try to leave one of the two administrators there for some continuity, and we'll continue to strive to do that.
Trustee Sikora.
Thank you. Maybe I didn't read the report in full, but it was some of the recommendations are for out of boundary students. Now there are several out of region students. I think that's the proper term. Are they going to be grandfathered in any case? Or are they just considered as being out of boundary?
Through the chair. The changes with regards to out of district are largely consistent with the out of bounds. The expectation is they may remain. We do have direction identified with regards to out of district, and that is those students are part of the Holy Family school boundaries that we've established. So it's our expectation on a go forward that that would be a sort of consistent expectation, is that out of district students would continue to be directed in that towards that school community.
Good, Madam Chair. I think Manager of Planning meant Holy Spirit.
And what did I say? Yes, thank you. Definitely, I meant Holy Spirit. It's a long commute otherwise. Thank you for the correction.
Trustee Phillips, just a reminder to be careful on the questioning, just in light of.
Thank you. So one of the concerns that had come up was in regards to the school, public school and Catholic school being shared. I wasn't part of any of the process or the conversations. Is that something you were able to find a solution to? Because Catholic parents were concerned about, Catholic resources not being available to their students, and if there's some type of divide or a dedicated section for one school and another. How did that work? Did you find a solution to that?
Through the chair, there were some comments and questions specifically at the Holy Spirit CSAC meeting. We did have Adrian Fergula, the Senior Manager of Facility Services, also attend at the public open house to share specifics around the school design. With regards to school design, the assurance that has been provided to families is that for all intents and purposes, the Catholic school portion of the building is being designed and will operate like any other Catholic school. I think perhaps if I'm understanding the question more specifically, you may be inquiring about other learning resources. And so that is an ongoing work that is in progress with our public board counterparts with regards to operationalizing the library operations. And it's something that we continue to work through with regards to what the collection it looks like and how it is managed.
Can you keep us updated with that as you iron out the details?
Through the chair to the director is something that, as appropriate, we can bring information forward.
Through you, Madam Chair, as our Library Services Manager Shelley Wood outlined at our last meeting, and to what Manager Jennifer Passy just shared, we've already been in contact with Waterloo Public District School Board around the facility itself, and we are in the process of planning something with other jurisdictions, particularly in this case, Brant Haldeman, Norfolk, where they have a joint school. And we are going to be having some staff under the direction of Superintendent Foran visit with a series of questions to talk about what they've learned and some things that they would suggest for us to keep in mind or be wary of in beginning a project like this, because as everyone knows, this is the first time we've had a project like this in our region.
That's very helpful to know that. Thank you for sharing that. And I would love to learn how they go about that, just because I think it's going to be a more common thing to do going forward. And I would love to see how that pans out. Thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? Okay, seeing none. Move on then to the recommendation. Okay. Moving on then to the long-term accommodation plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as I see the slideshow is getting ready to go, everyone is aware that we are experiencing tremendous growth in the region and as a result in our schools. We have lots of portables that we'd like to turn into permanent space. And we have a lot of new schools underway. And so the purpose behind this plan is to provide trustees with an annual update on the demographic trends and enrollment and the future projects that we're considering. So Jennifer, if you're good to go.
Thank you again. The LTAP is being presented this evening, as we do annually, to reflect updated enrollment forecasts and reflect adjustment to strategic priorities. This report is being produced to satisfy the obligations of Board Policy 010, Facilities and Accommodations, which requires an annual presentation of current enrollment, future demographic trends, and potential schools being considered for boundary reviews or closures. Good news, there's no closures being recommended. So as you're no doubt aware, but I'm sharing to kind of ground the conversation, on the screen and as presented in the report are the number of capital priority projects that we currently have ministry funding approved for. As you're aware, we're open Holy Trinity and St. Patrick this fall, as well as a 6 classroom addition is currently under construction at St. Bridget. Expected to open in 26-27 school year is the new 7 to 12 school, as well as the Southeast Galt School, plus a number of additions that we received funding announcements for this winter, including St. Aloysius, St. Boniface, St. Gregory, St. Mark, and St. Paul. And then post 26-27 would be the opening of the new Baden Elementary School and Child Care Center. As presented in the report, we do have continued significant enrollment increases anticipated based on historic growth rates and the experience of enrollment this school year. The year over year, or the forecast period over forecast period growth is highlighted there in brackets for your information. Planning projections, you'll may note, will not be the same as the budget projections as they're developed under slightly different methodologies, but they are based off the October 31st actual enrollments together with development information based on application activity and known residential construction activity throughout the region. There are several factors that can affect our forecasts. And what materializes on the ground with regards to geopolitical politics, the results of the federal election, which we now largely know, interest rate adjustments, and changes in international student study and work permits. Overall, regional growth remains positive, although slightly weaker than in 2023. We do have the benefit this year of being able to continue to monitor our enrollment on a daily basis through our Staffing Plus software, with new Aspen data being fed to it every day. So we've got sort of a live feed of an understanding of what's currently in the system and what is to come for September. In terms of elementary utilization over the same forecast period, there is steady growth. Beyond the 25-26 enrollment projection, though, utilization in our forecast does not account for those new pupil places that I mentioned are being constructed or will be constructed. So we are accounting for the projects that are opening this fall, but beyond that, because some of those are reliant on boundary changes and other circumstances, those forecasted future pupil places will be caught up in future long-term accommodation reports. We have identified, based on the forecasted enrollments and utilization, updated strategic initiatives in the immediate term. It is our hope and our understanding, based on recent discussions with the Ministry of Education, that similar timeline will be applied this year for capital priority submissions. So we are expecting a call sometime late June, early July, with an early fall deadline. That's our understanding at this stage of the game. In which case it's staff's recommendation that we would be submitting capital priorities resubmitting capital priorities applications for the new North Cambridge Elementary School and Childcare, the additions at Monsignor Doyle and St. David, as well as the reconstruction of St. Bernadette. We're also suggesting that we would put forward applications for the new Dune South Elementary School, as well as an addition at Monsignor Haller. In response to existing capital that was, or new capital that was committed, we would also be initiating the West Galt boundary review, as well as contemplating bringing forward in the next 2 years ahead of the new Baden School opening, the boundary review that's necessary to establish a boundary for that new school community. We will continue to work to confirm site locations in Northwest Cambridge, as well as Beaver Creek Meadows, which is in North Waterloo, and working with the City of Kitchener staff, identifying school site opportunities in the currently under development Dundee secondary plan. I say development, I don't mean shovels in the ground. I mean, the planning documents are in process and we're actively engaged with city staff through that process, as well as looking to identify future high school site locations in both Kitchener-Waterloo and in Cambridge, which is a consistent priority from the last LTAP. In terms of the medium to long term, so taking out 27-28 and 28-29 school year out to the end of our forecast projection period, we are looking to identify additional solutions for elementary accommodation in the Kitchener-Waterloo core area, as well as if we are fortunate to receive additional funding for North Cambridge and Dune South, we would have boundary reviews to undertake for those two school communities. And in the longer term, we would be looking at submitting capital priorities applications for Beaver Creek Meadows, West Rosenberg, which is the site that we had previously had reserved through the draft plan of subdivision process, as well as looking at an additional school site in the Breslau expansion area. When we were here a year ago, we were talking about this notionally, given that there was some provincial approvals to official plans that were in flux. But we know now that that expansion area of Breslau has been approved, and the township is working through the process to establish what that new community vision looks like. Again, we would have further boundary reviews for West Rosenberg. The secondary reviews, again, subject to finding sites and funding, and that's in Kitchener-Waterloo as well as Cambridge. In terms of what our planning process looks like over the next 2 years, we have upcoming next spring the update of our education development charge bylaw. That is on a 5-year review cycle. And so that process would be getting underway with early investigations throughout this summer with a view to having ministry endorsement of our background study early spring and bring this to the board for their consideration around April in order to have new rates in effect for June of 2026. Around the same timeline, we would be bringing our updated long-term accommodation plan, and then the following year, a more robust review, a comprehensive review of our long-term plan would be taking place. So I'd be pleased to take questions with regards to the presentation and staff's report.
Questions from trustees? Trustee Stanley.
Thank you. I think this is a really fascinating topic. It's really challenging to navigate too, right? Is it the time horizon 2033 the longest term that we've looked out to at the moment? Because I'm just wondering, it's right now we're definitely a growing board, but and we know in the report here that there isn't even, and not only is there continued immigration, though that's scaling back, but we also have an increase in population in their childbearing years. But you know, demographic trends seem to suggest that that's continuing to decline, and they predict that eventually Canada, before too long, is going to have, you know, South Korean level demographics, which means I think less than 1 child for every 2 people. When is there an account for the fact that the growth that we're seeing right now might reach, there might be this intersection of the cutback in immigration and declining childbirths could really actually crimp our population, and I'm not going to say, I think our medium term is only about 5 years, but I'm going to say the long term by our standards. So I'm talking about 10, 15 years from now.
Through the chair, it's certainly something that we're continuing to monitor and engage conversations with the Region of Waterloo, who you know, has a very robust demographics department, who's looking at these kind of things, engaging with the post-secondary school communities, which is one of the bigger sectors that are affected by the changes. At this stage, based on conversations that we've had, we've sort of maintained a somewhat status quo approach, recognizing the growth that we have benefited from, and the likely expectation is that that any of these implications will not necessarily be sort of immediate. They're going to occur over time. So as permits may not be renewed, as students graduate from programs that they've already been accepted to, for example, those effects may be seen over a longer period of time than a single year. So we're going to continue to have those conversations, monitor those trends within our schools, and recognize that there is still a significant amount of growth forecasted within this community, which is not going to be entirely driven by the international population. And I think, you know, as I stated in the presentation, there are things like broader geopolitical issues that we're going to have to monitor, including the fact that with this new government, are there any changes that they may institute policy-wise that may impact us? So it's very much an ongoing monitoring effort that we have at this stage, and are not making significant adjustments in our forecasts yet.
If I may, just a follow-up question. Do we base our demographics mainly on the data from the region of Waterloo? I'm just wondering, do they keep separate data on Catholic families in terms of Catholic immigrants or Catholic families and the number of children they're having relative to the general population? Or do we just sort of operate on I guess, historical trends, the way our board has interpreted their data as a lump sum, so to speak?
Through the chair. So the Ministry of Finance projections, the Region of Waterloo projections, they are aggregate based on census methodologies. So they're not necessarily specifically forecasting, you know, Catholic school age numbers. Our numbers in our forecasts are reflective of students in our schools, participation rates, which vary by school and community. And so those are things that we take into account in terms of how our enrollment is trending, our participation rates are trending relative to those other forecasts.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Sikora.
Actually, I have one very quick clarification and a question, really. So the educational development charges from your slide, they're going to be reviewed in this coming spring, not this year, right? Okay. Are any of these schools currently limited or forecasted to be limited by the number of portables on site? Because I recall hearing once that St. Benedict's was at a limit right now.
Through the chair, we do have schools where it is becoming challenging to site portables. Trustee Sikora, you asked specifically about St. Benedict. We do have a project underway right now to expand firefighting capacity for the additional portables that are being added to that school. So there are measures that we can take when we encounter capacity limitations. When we think about capacity limitations, the things that we're looking at are the implications on a site, available parking. We have separation distance requirements between buildings and portables based on fire code. We have capacity limitations with regards to the number of washroom fixtures, and firefighting capacity, typically above and beyond 12 units, requires an additional hydrant to be installed. And so there are certainly costs related to that, as well as hydro capacity. So there's several different factors at play. There's no one size fits all answer or solution when we start to encounter those circumstances, but where we have prioritized capital requests are largely in part due to existing and forecasted pressures and how our existing schools are currently able or will be able to meet those accommodation needs with temporary capacity.
Thank you. My question is loosely connected to Trustee Sikora's, just about space. So when I look at page 96 of the report, I can see that so many of our schools are going to be over 100% capacity, even, 10 years from now. And in my visits to schools recently, I would talk to as an administrator about an addition or more portables. And this is where they're going to go, right on top of the existing basketball court or right on top of a space where the children would play. So as our schools grow, the area for play, recess, before school, after school is shrinking. And I guess my question is about I realize that's a reality and we can't get away from that. We can't increase the space. But what can we put in place to help staff to deal with some of that? And maybe that question is more for Director Dowling, because I think of as we increase students in that same space, other concerns may arise. Parking and traffic is certainly one of them, because I know that that's growing at schools, but even the ability for extracurriculars to happen outside. You've got 4 soccer games in the space of what could be 2, and that spins off under other things, potential bullying, physical injury, and so on. So anyway, I guess my question is the identification of, yes, as the space, as the building grows, the outside space shrinks, and what can we do to support schools in order to get through that?
For you, Madam Chair, thank you for that question. It is a challenge at sites that we have today. And it continues to be a challenge as we're making the predictions that are outlined in the long-term accommodation plan. Some of the things that we've tried to do are changing what recess looks like. Lunch in particular, we know that our lunch hour is a 40-minute outdoor time. And so what does that time look like for students, and how can we essentially do it differently? So I think of some schools that have been creative in having one half of the school population outside at another, and then the other half at another time. We're going to have to continue to look for those creative solutions because, as you say, some of our space is literally evaporating when we have to place another portable or more there. I think one of the things that we're going to have to look at is what sorts of things can we do through healthy active living to utilize spaces differently. We have traditional activities that we've encouraged students or allowed students to participate in. I think we're going to have to look at what are the non-traditional activities that will still allow for that physical activity, but might not be exactly the same as things that we've seen in years past. It's going to be a continued development. I was just at St. Boniface, for example, and was thankful to learn that the addition at St. Boniface is not going on in the way that a traditional addition would be happening at that school, which frees up some of that space. And so I think that's the other part of it, is that when we get to some of these spots, not only with the architect, but looking at where future portables can go, how do we maximize the green and or asphalt space? So it's not just with staff, I would suggest it's with the planning department about where can we physically locate, knowing that the majority of our schools are going to either have an addition, and when they don't have an addition, probably portables. So what can we do as we're prepping for that, getting ahead of that?
May I ask just a follow-up quickly? Is there any talk about expanding consultants' roles in either healthy active living or mental health to help administrators and staff to address those concerns?
So through you, Madam Chair, there isn't a specific conversation about it. And I think, as everyone in the room probably recognizes, we're waiting for the core education funding announcement, as is every other board in the province, because we all want to see what our funds are before we can talk about any staffing roles, because that's going to significantly impact that. So I think it's a combination of looking at the role, looking at what the role can do. How do we do things differently? As I look at the superintendents at the back, one of the things that we have talked about at Executive Council regularly and with our administrators is how do we do things differently? Because things have changed and the funding doesn't always match it. Our growth is great, but it also presents some of the challenges that we've spoken about tonight. So we are constantly looking and asking staff, how can we approach this differently?
Weiler.
Through you, Chair, I was just curious, the future immediate term capital priorities that will go forward for the capital funding submission June and beyond, are they in the order of priority already based on demand, or how does that work when we look for ministry funding? Say, for example, if we wanted the Dune South before New North Cambridge.
Through you, Madam Chair. No, so they are not in the order of priority at this stage. When staff brings forward the recommended projects for the board's consideration, we will bring forward a ranking of those projects for consideration as part of those decisions. Different factors come into play in terms of the urgency, what issues have not been met. We'll take into consideration the ministry's criteria as well. I think we know what it's likely to look like, but it is an evolving process. There's continuous improvement at the ministry level with regards to how they undertake and evaluate capital priorities. So when we have more information, that will all be part of the context of how we bring forward for your consideration the ranking of those projects.
Questions from trustees? Trustee Stanley.
Just one more question that kind of ties into what Trustee Weiler was talking about and also ties back to my question, which was who sets the time horizons? Is it the ministry that we would, in terms of planning and demographics? Is this something that we change or that we've used for the same time horizon for the last several decades?
With regards to our planning process, we typically work with a 10-year horizon. So this long-term accommodation plan, I had mentioned that in 2027, we'll have sort of a 3-year major review cycle, at which point we'll extend it. Up to this point, we've been working sort of to that 2032-33 horizon. And so as we enter into the more comprehensive review of the plan, we'll also extend the horizon. We do look in other processes sort of beyond the 2032-33, but for continuity with this document, that is the time horizon that's being presented. To answer the question about does the ministry stipulate timelines, they do not. With regards to their capital priorities, they do have timelines that they look for us to provide projections for, but in terms of the long-term accommodation plan, they do not prescribe how a board presents or undertakes long-term accommodation planning. So this is our Waterloo Catholic plan. There are other reporting obligations with regards to forecasts that have different horizons for different purposes. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
One fairly simple question. On the last page of the report, there's a very colorful chart and I don't understand it.
I apologize. Are you looking for an explanation of the chart, Trustee Sikora? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There are two charts, figure 15 and the subsequent figure 16, which are presenting the configuration of our French immersion programs. And it appears as though for some reason, that's because figure 16 is at the top of the second to last page. Yes, so that is the chart explanation. It's how our elementary school, all of our existing elementary schools feed into our French immersion programs at elementary, and then ultimately how they become part of our secondary programs.
Any other questions from trustees? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much. Now we will move on to 8.2, which is the MYSP consultant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'd like to invite Josh Fullen up for trustees. You remember Josh is a consultant with Maximum City who has been contracted to do the consultation for our next iteration of the multi-year strategic plan. And so Josh is just here to provide, and as promised, an update of the work that he and his colleagues have been up to so far.
Thank you to the director and thank you to the committee. My job, as just described, is to give you an update on the NYSP development process. I do have a short presentation, and I really want the audience to focus on the key takeaways thus far. And I will say this as a caveat, we are about 40% of the way through the process. So the data that you see reported on tonight is not the full data set. So please take it with that caveat in mind, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. So there are three things I would like to report on. One is the visioning session we had as a group on February 10th. I'll go through that one pretty quickly. The key takeaways from all of the consultations is they're all on one slide, and that's really sort of the meat of the presentation. I will leave that up there for a moment. And then we will get into the emerging themes from the full data set, what we are calling the codes or the emerging themes that have percolated thus far in our analysis, and then we'll leave it open for questions. So a bit of a reminder for this group, this is the timeline that we are following. It's sort of adapted from the ministry's timeline. We're sort of towards the end of phase 2 where we're gathering the information. We've already started the analysis. And as I said, it's about 40% of the way through the entire process, just rounding off the second phase. Phase 3 will be mostly us with our noses in the data, looking at it, and then we will bring forward recommendations to this group. The visioning session, which took place in this room back in February, asked these 4 questions. And these are the same 4 questions we have carried out into the community. And we have used these in different contexts throughout facilitated sessions to gather all of that sort of experience, that lived experience from your community to inform the new strategic priorities. And I just have one slide for each of these questions. I'm not going to read all of the bullet points. I'll maybe read one from each slide, and you can look at these sort of illustrated quotes as well on the right of the slide. So this was the question about what you wanted for students who entered Waterloo Catholic schools. And we heard that faith should be central. Students should be rooted in Catholic values and have space to grow spiritually. Second question was an asset-based question. What are the strengths of the Waterloo Catholic District School Board? And we heard that community partnerships, public trust, and a track record as a provincial leader that does more with less was a real strength of the board. We heard that across groups. There was a really strong sense that Waterloo Catholic punches above its weight. And then for the challenges that students and staff will face in the next few years, one, and this is relevant to the discussion earlier, rapid growth is draining facilities, staffing, and program delivery. Quality of program, and there is a real pride in the quality of program in Waterloo Catholic, relies on the quality and well-being of staff. So you can't have the quality program without the quality staff. That was something we heard clearly as a challenge that came with growth. And then finally, how can the district support students and staff to meet those challenges? We heard many different sort of solutions that matched the challenges on the previous slide. And these are more operational in nature. And one of the things we heard that wraparound supports for students were becoming more and more important. So things like nutrition programs in school, childcare being offered on site, tutoring, caring adults, and community connections. So that was a summary of the visioning session. A little bit of a sort of more detailed slide around what we have done since we last saw you. So there is an online survey that is in the field for all, for any participant, for any audience to respond to at this time. We are also conducting a future skills student activity with select schools that is being facilitated by the innovation consultants and classroom teachers. And then we have completed a number of facilitated sessions with board committees and different groups, and you see that list there. And we are contemplating some school visits in the month of May and June. Not included in the analysis to this point, I just got this report this morning from research. So these survey responses have not been read, coded, or analyzed, so they're not part of the next slide. But I want to give you an indication of what is coming in. So we have over 1,500 responses from students, a very robust response rate. We have over 1,000 responses from staff. Again, that's very strong. Staff had a bit of a head start on the survey because it was launched in early May during a PD session for staff. And then just because of the timing and the order of operations, the rest of the audience groups got it later. Parents, we have at 359, and I'm sure that number will grow in the next few weeks. And then we have other responses as well. And in terms of that classroom activity, we have 16 classrooms have already submitted for our future skills activities. So that will give us a really strong evidence base going forward to make some recommendations. And this is the slide I would like to spend just a couple of minutes on, because this is sort of our kind of gut check of the data. When we have read through all of the submission responses thus far, all of the facilitated session, we've looked at all of our notes. These are the key takeaways, and I will spend a moment reading these. Challenges and opportunities brought on by rapid growth and changing demographics. There's a clear articulation in the data set that belonging and mattering are foundational to the school experience. So before you can get to that quality program I spoke to earlier, students really need to feel like they belong and they mattered, and that applies to staff as well. There is a demonstrable commitment to preserving and strengthening Catholic identity and positive faith formation as the core of the board's work. There's a rigorous approach to data collection, analysis, and evidence-based decision-making. There's a strong appetite for innovation and new technologies among the parent and staff groups we have heard from, particularly with regard to new instructional strategies, the use of AI. There's a real culture of yes and in the board, so almost a risk-taking culture around those aspects. A strong focus on future readiness for a changing and uncertain world, and ensuring that students have the supports they need to succeed in school and beyond. And as I said, a really strong sense of professional pride throughout the staff groups and holding high standards, despite sort of workload and capacity concerns and the challenges of growth. That sense of professional pride across staff came out clearly in all of the groups we listened to. Those are the key takeaways. And then in terms of our coding process, what we do is we read all of the comments, we assign keywords to the comments, and then start to develop these themes. And as I said, these are emerging. They're not a one-to-one translation to your strategic priorities, because remember, we would have to distill this list of 12 plus 1 down to 3 or 4 to sort of match the number of strategic priorities that typically go into these plans. But these are the things that are percolating in the data set. And I just have a couple of slides that illustrate these emerging themes and show you some key words. So and I would really focus on the key words here rather than the operational definition of these codes. So in belonging and well-being, we're hearing things like words like mattering, respect, community, welcoming, and safety. This is we separated this from belonging and well-being because it really refers to physical safety and being free from harm, being free from physical harm or psychological harm. So it's separate. We found in the comments from belonging and well-being, we're hearing things like bullying, self-regulation, and respect in that theme. Learning and future readiness, which is sort of the biggest bucket, I would say, of comments. Many comments are directed at this core priority of the district. It's not just learning, it's learning and future readiness. That's very intentional on our part because there is that really strong sense of preparing students for an uncertain and changing world. And the keywords there are academic excellence, prepared, raise the bar, staff support and growth, words like collaboration, workload, new ideas, student support. And the keywords there are opportunity, thriving environment, and IEP, technology and innovation. We have data-driven AI and privacy, Catholic education and faith. Another one of the very large buckets, I would say, in the data set. Words like parish and the sort of the connection or the relationship between home, parish, and school, Catholic values and church. We have equity, diversity, and human rights, and we're seeing keywords like inclusivity, multi-language learners, and nutrition. In Indigenous rights, we're finding words like placekeeping, injustices, and land acknowledgement. And finally, we have facilities and resources, and the keywords there are immigration, accessibility, enrollment, family and parent connections, responsibility, behavior, and support, leadership and governance. The keywords there we have are growth, leadership and communication, And then there's sort of a separate category that is really sort of a meta category around the structure and the design of the MYSP. And that's more about the keywords, more about the graphics, the design and the icons that might go into the structure and the ultimate production of the multi-year strategic plan. So there they are again, the emergent themes. There's sort of 12 main themes, and then that last one that is sort of a meta theme. And that rounds off my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. And then just to help sort of guide the conversation, we've put these 3 questions up there to really focus on the process and the outcomes, but obviously I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Trustee Phillips.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was great to see all that feedback collected. Now, I noticed some of the numbers of the amount of people you collected feedback from. For example, you stated that there was roughly 1,500 students who gave feedback, 1128 staff. But what really concerned me that there was only 359 parents consulted, and parents being stakeholders and being invested so much in their children's lives. What can you do to improve the feedback from parents? Because those numbers should be just as high, if not more, than some of these other numbers.
Thanks for the question through you, Madam Chair. Totally agree. And if this were the last day of the consultation period, I would be very concerned with that number. But keep in mind that survey for the parents was just launched. So the staff had an advance opportunity to respond to it. Students have had opportunities in their classroom to respond to it. So by the end of this process, we will certainly make sure that there is a robust response from parents. And I think you'll see that number climb in the next few weeks as more parents have an opportunity to respond to the survey while it's in the field.
And just to follow up, if that's okay, really quickly, with that feedback that you collect from parents, is there chances that some of the information you presented us might morph or change in any way?
Thank you again for the question. And yes, to my comment at the beginning, take this data with the caveat that we have not seen all of the data, and what you see are emerging themes. So this could change. We're seeing things come out of the data that we typically see in these processes, but absolutely things could change as we go through the process and we see more responses, particularly in the survey, which is typically the largest sort of tool for collecting responses. So yes, it can change. You're welcome.
Thank you. I guess sort of to follow up on Trustee Phillips' question, sort of 2 questions about the number of participants. Is that the proportions roughly the same as what you would expect with other boards at this stage of the process?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. I would say it depends, and I would say at this point, you're a little bit ahead of sort of what the mean would be in these processes. But I would want to wait until the end of the process to give you an answer about comparable numbers in other boards. But given the size of this board and given the number of parents and the number of students, I would say you are a little bit ahead of the numbers we typically see. But please ask me that question again in a couple months when the consultation period has closed. Particularly the number of student responses, I would say, is very robust. And the fact that we're doing a future skills activities in classrooms to get sort of real authentic feedback from students, I would say kind of raises the response rate that we typically see. But more on that in a few months when we have the full numbers.
Okay, and sort of the other part of that question was the numbers, the students, which grade levels are responding? Do we know?
Yes, so it's a full K-12 experience. And we've actually designed 2 different experiences, one for younger students and one for older students. And the innovation consultants helped us identify which schools would be good candidates to deploy the activity in. And they would be able to answer sort of how that selection process was conducted. And I think it was about sort of smoothing the opportunity over different schools and also not burdening schools that maybe had other programs or initiatives taking place in them as well.
So I did the survey, last week, and I couldn't help but notice the questions. Normally, you see yes, no, like yes, go before no, but these ones, the no go comes first. And then I was also curious, like, because in other parts of the survey, I was also noticing the answers are a bit different than what I would have expected, you know, because usually in other surveys I've done, you know, at my workplace and what have you, it's usually most positive at the top, most negative at the bottom, whereas your survey is flipped. Is that intentional or?
Thank you for the question through you, Madam Chair. Is it possible, Trustee Cuff, that you are speaking about the first part of the survey, which was an analysis of the existing MYSP? Because I don't think any of our questions have that structure. I'm looking back at my colleague who's agreeing with me. So I think it might be, there were two surveys sort of folded into one. One was sort of an analysis of the current MYSP, and the second one was a forward-looking about the second MYSP. So I can only speak to the second half of this survey, and none of our questions reflected the structure you just described, as far as I know, and as far as Todd knows.
Any other questions from trustees? Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, Trustee Weiler.
Very much for the report. I was curious on the key takeaways and emerging themes from the other sort of strategic processes that you've gone through, sort of leaning in a little bit to Trustee Sikора's feedback. Is there anything that stands out to you as emerging as unique at our board, or that you're surprised at our board that maybe you haven't seen, you know, as strong in some of the other processes that you've done?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, and through you, Madam Chair, it's certainly something we've reflected on. And I would say there are a few things that we are hearing that are unique to the context of Waterloo Catholic. One is the growth issue, and that is probably does not surprise this group and relevant to the conversation earlier. The other piece is that really strong sense of professional pride. I mean, we really heard that from staff, that staff take their work very seriously. It is full of moral purpose. They want to be leaders in the province. They want to lead across portfolios. They hold very high expectations for each other, for their students. And that's certainly something we've heard in other districts, but maybe not to quite the sort of level we're hearing it here. And the other piece I would say that's really strong is the future readiness, preparing students for a future. And that may be a reflection of the time we are in. We hear lots about learning across districts, but I don't think we've ever heard quite so much about the job of school now is really also strongly about preparing students for life after school and getting future ready. Building skills that are transferable, that they don't just use in school, but they use in workplaces and in social situations. And that approach to being future ready is not something we've heard to the degree that we're hearing in Waterloo Catholic. So those three things, the growth, the professional pride, and the future readiness are certainly unique to this data set, I would say. You're welcome.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I find it very informative. I just wanted to focus on the student involvement because I think it's absolutely imperative. I know we have our two student trustees online tonight, but I'm wondering about tapping into our student councils that are true leaders in our secondary, and if they've had an opportunity specifically for them to give any input, or are they included just in the general student population?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And through you, Madam Chair, that is sort of a method that we would take advantage of in processes like this, is to tap into the student leaders, because they often are hearing from their peers about what issues are important. So at this point, we have the student survey and we have the future skills activity, but that is certainly something that we can bring up within our working group to see if we can get the survey in particular advertised to those student leaders. And sometimes student leaders in the context of a student council meeting, or even a supra student council meeting. I don't know if you have a supra student council in this board where you have all the leaders of the student councils gathered together. They can facilitate their own activity and sort of, empower the students to facilitate their own activity around these simple questions. And we could hand over a toolkit to them and sort of just be in the back of the room. That's certainly something we've done in the past in other districts and works very well. So I appreciate you. bringing
Yeah,
it up.
I'm gonna throw that to both of them up there. I see trustee Berwick with her hand up. So I would really hope that they could be the conduit to facilitating that, and because I just think that that's imperative.
Agreed. Thank you.
Trustee Burswick.
Yeah, so for sure. So Trustee Leone and I do have access to the Student Senate, which has all the co-presidents from each of the high schools. So we would be able to share this with them. And also we have individual access to our own student councils at our schools. So this would definitely be something that's possible and encouraged even for us.
Thank you to the student trustee. And I will follow up with the working group on other possibilities in terms of deploying direct to student and student leadership consultations.
Phillips.
Oh, just a quick, easy question. I don't know if it was mentioned before, but how long do parents have to fill, to give their feedback back to you? Just for our knowledge.
Thank you for the question through you, Madam Chair. The survey closes at the end of May. And there may be other sort of forums for parents that we are still contemplating within the working group, but the main sort of tool for parents to give their feedback is that survey, and it closes at the end of May. You're welcome.
I would just like to also say, if in terms of consulting students, that we should try to reach out in terms of some sort of blind survey, and not just student leaders, because student leaders go through a certain process. Sometimes they're handpicked. They don't always I can tell this as a student when I went to, they don't always represent what's going through the mind of sort of the average student. So I think if we're going to really push on student involvement, we should try to find out a way to connect with students who wouldn't normally want to be part of a process like this, because they might have a very different set of values and priorities that I think we need to tap into as well.
Thank you, trustee. And through you, Madam, yes, to the director.
For you, Madam Chair, and I'm not sure if you were going to say this, Josh, but Trustee Stanley, to your question, and I'm going to lean into Superintendent Foran here, who has been facilitating this with staff. We are actually, part of the activities are designed to go into entire classrooms. So it is a broad cross-section of the student experience. We do want to hear from our student leaders, but we also want to hear from all students. And so I'm just going to lean into Superintendent Foran.
Thank you, Director Dowling, and through Madam Chair. Yes, we took a look at all families of schools, and we asked each superintendent to pick several schools in their family of schools, and then we met with those administrators, and they targeted specific classrooms in the school so that we have a wide representation of all student voices in the school. And we did that for the elementary schools, and we also did that for the secondary schools as well.
I just wanted to add a comment just to Trustee Phillips that we did actually ask for the CSAC chairs and co-chairs to share in their parent communities to try to drum up more responses. So just wanted to share that.
Sorry, can I ask one question? I was just surfing through the emails and it said something about May 23rd as the deadline. So is it the end of May indeed, or is it May 23rd? Just so I'm not giving incorrect information to parents.
So thank you, trustee. I will confirm that date with research and get a response to the committee within the next couple of days. My understanding was we were going to leave it open until the end of May. Research may have, they may be avoiding duplication with another survey, so they may have adjusted that. But I will check with research and get back to you with a firm response.
That would be great. And Renee, if you could share that with us, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? Oh.
Is there any part of the process involving clergy at all at this stage?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. We have spoken at length in the working group level about the right way to engage that community in particular. We've talked about visiting the deanery, which we have done in other processes in Catholic boards. We do have a specific audience in terms of we do have a specific set of questions in the survey in terms of clergy responses, and we'll continue to work on engaging that audience in particular. It's still something that's in the works. And I think it is particularly important, given what we are hearing thus far in the consultation record, that third bullet point you see right there, demonstrable commitment to preserving and strengthening Catholic identity and positive faith formation. That's really the core of the board's work. So.
So thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, just as an addition to what Josh shared, you are all aware of the Forward Together as Pilgrims of Hope, the school parish collaboration that occurred on April the 30th. So at the end of that session, I spoke to the assembled groups, but in particular to the clergy that were there and parish staff, and gave them the link to the survey and asked them to take the 10 to 15 minutes to complete it at some point in the next few weeks. So that's all I left it. And so I saw that. I was happy to see that some people had responded on one of your slides, Josh. So I'll be sending something out to the dean probably this week just to ask to send a reminder to the deanery.
Not seeing any more questions from trustees. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up or facilitate?
No, just in closing that, you know, one of the things that we get to do is go out and listen to your community about their priorities and what they want from their public schools. And it is a real privilege to be a part of that process and to go out and listen to folks. So thank you for listening to me tonight. Good night.
Thank you. With that, we will move into our linkages and pastoral activity, and superintendents, we will say good evening to you. Can I get a comment from the chairs? How long do you think we need? 15 minutes? Okay, we'll get underway. Oh, David is not back. Okay, we'll get underway. Trustee Sikora, would you like to do the summary for linkages?
Yeah, so quickly, there's several letters of congratulations going out to some recipients of awards recently and clerical appointments. We discussed the recent activities of trustees, and sort of a reminder again to try to fill in the one spreadsheet for the linkages. My voice is starting to go now. We also looked at the upcoming activities, the secondary convocations. Not everybody has filled in what they'd be able to attend. So I'd ask if you could. Trustee Doherty Masters has offered to tweak the greetings that we'll be providing because we want a consistent greetings across all schools. We have the Southeast Galt School event coming up. Nutrition for Learning breakfast, interfaith community breakfast coming up. That pretty much covers our linkages meeting for this evening.
Thank you. Trustee Karen.
Thank you, Chair. We did not have a robust agenda on this one, but we did speak about Catholic Education Week that has just wrapped up, and several of us were able to participate in a number of items. Several of us were at the folk dancing events in both Kitchener and Cambridge, and we were able to see the play I Am at St. Peter's, and a play also at St. Margaret's of Scotland the week before. And probably what came up really interestingly from our student trustee is that they held a mock conclave during Catholic Education Week at Resurrection High School. That's coincidentally perfectly timed, and had a lot of sort of interaction and engagement with the students on that. So we're really pleased to hear that. So that's it.
Thank you. We'll move on then to item 8.1. The OCSTA communications link was provided for everyone to view. I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair Weiler to go through 8.1.1 mandatory training modules.
So this is the fun one, but as you probably are aware from different communications, the Ministry of Education had revised the requirements of its essential governance training. And the updated professional development training really supports the implementation of the Better Schools and Student Outcomes Act. The professional development program that we have to undertake in 2025 focuses on 4 areas of governance: mediation and conflict resolution, financial management and governance, effective community engagement to promote student achievement, and the Director of Education performance approval process. So the training that we are essentially expected to do, there are 6 self-directed online modules. So all Ontario School Board trustees and directors of education are expected to complete the new online learning modules, and they are available now. There's 6 of them available in English and French. So it's module 5, the Director of Education Hiring and Performance Appraisal. Module 8, Understanding Conflict and Managing It Effectively. Module 9, Effective Community Engagement to Support Student Achievement. Module 13, Education Finance. Module 17, the trustee code of conduct, and Module 19, audit and the role of audit committees. And so overall, those are the 6 that are now available to us, and we are expected to take. So that's part 1. Part 2 is the webinars. And you will have seen that Stephanie sent out a number of invitations to these webinars. And essentially, they're all going to be taking place in the spring. If you are able to attend the online synchronous versions, those will be available real time, so to speak, but the sessions will be recorded and made available on the OCSC's Good Governance website. All of the data on the completion of the modules and the completion of the webinars will be shared with the Ministry of Education. So the 6 online modules are to be completed by August 31st, 2025. And all of the webinars are to be completed by August 31st, 2025, whether you take them as online synchronous in the spring, or whether you look at them offline through the recordings. And so there are 4 webinars and 6 modules altogether with an August 31st deadline. And I know with us coming up upon end of year events and then into the summer, sometimes August 31st dates get lost. So it sort of behooves us probably to try to get it done before the end of the school year. But certainly August 31st is the deadline. Any questions about any of the modules? The full listing of what I've shared is available in the link that is in the OCSTA folder, and it has been emailed out previously to trustees, and the webinar invites have been put in our calendars, but this is just to highlight our requirements one last time so that we know what we have to do.
In fact, the first webinar starts tomorrow, effective community engagement to promote student achievement. And then regularly after that, every week, yes. So I've already signed up for those, so.
Yeah, so just one of the things that was mentioned in the announcement from Oxbow was that there's a certificate available at the end. When I was going through training modules originally, when I started my term as a trustee, I was never getting it to show complete. You'd get to the end and it would just, did anybody else experience that? Were other people able to get their, to show complete? Okay.
So maybe there was a tech issue, but
Yeah.
I would definitely ask OCSTA if that happens again, though, on this one.
Yeah. Just wanted to mention that.
Just to clarify, the invites that we're getting, those are the seminars, but then we also have to individually go in and do those modules like as a self-study.
That's right. So there's 4 webinars and they start tomorrow weekly for 4 weeks. And you can either view them as per the schedule, which is synchronous, or the recorded versions asynchronous, and then plus 6 modules. So it's a total of 10 items altogether.
So everybody is clear then on expectation of that? No other further questions? Trustee Phillips?
If we're not able to make the live one and we view the recorded one, do we just message you after we complete each recorded one? Or how would you know?
I can speak to that. So they are tracking it, both whether you take it synchronous or asynchronous through the way that they've packaged the recording.
So we don't have to let you know, you'll just know.
The OCSTA will know, not us, and they will pass that on to the ministry.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on now to the feedback portion. So we're going to go through trustee self-evaluation and student trustee feedback. We're going to start with the student trustee feedback. And I know both of you are online, but just thought we could, the other way was better. Yeah. Yep, perfect. Okay, so yeah, we're just gonna kind of go through what was the feedback in general, and then if you guys would like to chime in on anything, please raise your hand and we can go from there. If so, access to, yeah, okay. Trustees were provided an orientation package, and then the comment there to improve the training, just perhaps going over the bylaws and procedures a bit more could be helpful, especially if they've not done that before. So thank you for that feedback. Access to board resources was provided as needed. So it seems like we got response quickly when questions were asked. Good to hear. Support was provided by having an assigned trustee mentor and superintendent to answer questions. So some feedback there from you know, being helpful and understanding the organization. And then some other feedback about just, you know, perhaps maybe being a little bit more forward in assisting if people may not know what questions to ask. So so that's feedback. So thank you for that. Comfortable sharing views. Never felt unsafe, or that I'm at least allowed to, that you never felt unsafe and that you're welcome to speak during a meeting. So that's great to hear. Thank you for that. And then just opportunity to participate in student leadership activities. So good to hear that you both participated in various activities within your schools. So I'm glad to hear, you know, you had a well-rounded experience. Reported regularly to activities. So I certainly feel that you both did a great job of covering off what was happening within your schools. So glad to hear that that you felt you were doing a good job in that regard too. Okay. That's the final question. I'll throw it back to trustees, student trustees, if you have anything that you'd like to add regarding your experience. Steve Burswick.
Yeah, thank you. So generally, I want to go over the fact that my time has been quite positive. I've gotten a lot of experiences from this, and I've learned quite a bit. I think generally speaking, it's just a very intimidating role at first. So just giving more understanding of things like bylaws would be helpful for the future. But other than that, I think it's pretty good.
That's great to hear. Trustee Leon. Trustee Leon, you can go ahead. If you're trying to speak, we can't hear you, so perhaps you could use the chat. Okay, trustee Leon, unfortunately, we're not seeing anything from you. Oh. Okay. I don't see that. Just, do you mind reading it then? Okay.
Student trustee Leone says, I wanted to express my gratitude to the board for continued support with supporting me in my executive position in OCSTA, OSTA ACO, including the additional travel and participate in to attend executive functions in the organization. I know that our incoming are also interested in running for similar positions, so support for them would be important as well.
Thank you very much, trustee Leon. Appreciate your feedback. Okay, thanks both to student trustees. We'll move on now to the trustee self-evaluation. So I sent out questions for people to ponder as we discuss this. But perhaps first let's go through and just have a look at the results. So the Board of Trustees ensures that the system's affairs are managed with an appropriate degree of care and control within the context of Canadian Catholic values. So you can, I think if we want, I think we'll just go through these and then I have the questions to kind of lead the discussion, unless people have something specific that they want to say as we're going through it. There's evidence that the board demonstrates Catholic distinctiveness in its meetings. So we have those responses. The board maintains strong linkages with its Catholic partners, parishes, deanery, diocese. So most of us are putting that, filled out the survey, are putting that into the most of the time category. It's good to see. The board maintains strong linkages with its Catholic partner. Oh, that's the same question. The Board of Trustees monitors the implementation of this pastoral plan as part of the MYSP. And most of us are thinking most of the time there. Board of Trustees participates in charitable acts within the community. So we're fairly divided there in terms of what we think is happening. The board advocates and protects the distinctive nature of Catholic education through its work with OCSTA. Again, a bit of a divisive there. Moving now to the governance type questions. Board of Trustees adequately reviews finances and financial results against operating plans, budgets, and capital plans. This is good news that we all felt that we were doing that most of the time. So as I said, I have 6 trustees with a 7th in some comment. The Board of Trustees ensures compliance with board policies, Ministry of Education, and other externally imposed requirements. So we have most of the time. It's the driver on that one. Board of Trustees ensures compliance with board policies, Ministry of Education, and other externally imposed operating requirements. We're into the most of the time one. Board of Trustees understand their legal obligations and ensure they are being met. I do think we should talk about this one specifically. Does anyone have any comment that they wanted to share when they see this question? No? Okay. Let's keep going. The Board of Trustees sufficiently considers recommendations made in the auditor's report and management letter. So I think most of us are agreeing we're always or most of the time. Trustees' knowledge and understanding of the board's value, mission, multi-year strategic plan, and board improvement plan is reflected in how they deal with key issues. So we're a bit divided through that. Board of Trustees focus on strategic issues and delegate operational matters to staff. And again, a bit of a divisive there. Board of Trustees is effective in making decisions that help the school board achieve its mission, vision, values, and strategic priorities, putting that into most of the time. Board of Trustees planning and fiscal strategies anticipate future trends and priorities. So we're either in always, most of the time, as the majority. Board of Trustees monitors the progress of the multi-year strategic plan, keeps the plan at the forefront of board decisions. So we're into most or half the time on that one. Board of Trustees adopts and follows ethical standards governing the conduct of the board and board members. So we're a bit divided on that one as well. Board of Trustees has a schedule where board policies are reviewed annually and a process for revisions is in place. And so we're in agreement on that it's always or most of the time. The board's decisions and actions are consistent with its policies. So we're divided on that one as well. Moving to the board meetings themselves. Board agendas received to allow in time to allow board members to thoroughly prepare for meetings. So we're agreeing that that's always or most of the time. Board meetings begin and end on time. So most of us agree that most of the time we fall into that. There's sufficient opportunity for trustees to be heard and views to be discussed before decisions are made. So most of us felt that was always or most of the time. Board meetings are productive, effectively addressing agenda topics. It's good to see that we're either always or most of the time. Where proposals require Board of Trustee approval before implementation, there's sufficient time for staff to present risks and benefits for the board to provide constructive input. Again, I think it's positive that we're always or most of the time on that. Trustees promote the level of strategic discussion necessary to benefit the Director of Education and the system as a whole. We're a bit divided in that area. There is sufficient time allotted for in-camera meetings. I would say overall we're okay there, always or most of the time being the driver. Trustees deal with in-camera business appropriately. We are a bit divided in that question. Trustees respect the confidentiality of all in-camera and private meetings. We can come back to that. Trustees respect the confidentiality of all. Oh, that's the same question. Okay. Trustees know how to add items prior to board meetings and do so in a clear, constructive, and respectful manner. So we're agreeing most of the time or half the time. Trustees only depart from the approved agenda under special circumstances. So we're agreeing that that's always or most of the time. Communication, the Board of Trustees ensures mechanisms are in place to gather community and other stakeholder input. So we're a bit divided on that one as well. The Board of Trustees understands and fulfills its role in terms of community relations and building stakeholder and community support. Majority of us feel always or most of the time. The board has effective and appropriate communication vehicles and uses them to communicate clearly and regularly with appropriate staff and stakeholders. We're a bit divided on that. Trustees recognize staff, students, and community. Good to see we're agreeing that it's always or most of the time. Trustees monitor legislative changes. Always or most of the time is what most of us agree on. Trustees refer parent or community concerns to the appropriate staff. And we're aligned on always or most of the time. Trustees, that's the same one. Work of the board. The Board of Trustees ensures that specific strategies, goals, and actions are in plan to move us to the desired future state. We are a bit divided on that. Board of Trustees understands the nature and scope of work it needs to accomplish. I just did the appropriate staff one. I don't have that question, but let's do it. And trustees recognize staff, students, and community. We are aligned on that one. Trustees monitor legislative changes, advise, and did I already do that question? I thought I did. Okay. And we refer the parent or community concerns. We did that one. Okay. Work of the board. Okay. We did this one. I said we were divided on that one. Okay. Board of Trustees understands the work it needs to accomplish. We are divided on that one as well. Keep going there. Ongoing trustee education is both adequate and relevant. So we're divided on that one as well. Okay, let's keep going. Board of Trustees undertakes the appropriate planning relative to the nature and scope of the work it needs to accomplish. So most of us agree that's happening most of the time. Okay, keep going. The planning, we just did that one, so keep going. Uses committees and or work groups in an effective manner to accomplish the work of the board. So we're agreeing that that's most of the time or always. Okay. The work of the board is reviewed. Oh, the Board of Trustees seeks advice from staff and community when establishing direction for the work of the board. So we're half or most of the time. Okay. The work of the board is reviewed annually through a year-end report. So we're agreeing that that's taking place. Board director relationship. The Board of Trustees' sole official connection will be through the Director of Education. We are divided on that one. Board of Trustees will ensure that only officially passed motions are binding on the Director of Education. So we're agreeing that that's taking place as a majority. The Board of Trustees ensures the Director's education is formally assessed on an annual basis with feedback from trustees. So we are agreeing that that's happening always or most of the time. Board of Trustees recognize the Director of Education as its only employee and responsible for system operations. So we're divided in this area as well. We'll instruct the Director of Education, allowing the Director of Education to use any reasonable interpretation of the policies. So most of us feel this is happening most of the time or always. Okay. The Board of Trustees shall negotiate a contract with the Director of Education, stipulate compensation and benefits. So we are 100% aligned on that one. The chair runs an orderly meeting. We're agreeing that it's always or most of the time for that. The chair ensures that all issues before the Board of Trustees are well stated, clearly expressed. So we're agreeing on that as well, most of the time. The chair ensures everyone can speak on the operant subject under consideration. So most of us feel that always happens. And the chair will keep the Board of Trustees informed in a timely manner on all matters that might affect the board. So we feel most of the time or all the time that's happening. conveys to the director any concerns brought forward. Always or most of the time would capture most of us. Acts as the spokesperson for the Board of Trustees. Always or most of the time captures most of our responses on that. Works to be a chief governance officer, ensuring the integrity of the board's process. Most of us agree that's most of the time or always. First among equals and accords no special privileges or knowledge over other members of the board. We're agreeing that's most of the time or always. Assign trustees to board committees. Work to be equally distributed. So most of us are agreeing that that's always or most of the time. We'll set the agenda. Again, that's most of the time or always for most of us. Oh, here are the comments. Is this where we are now? Yeah, okay. So comments about you can see there the comments about needing in-depth education. I'm not going to read these. I'll just pause so that people can take a read on the screen. This is the final final section of this, and then I just want to go into a few discussion points. And scroll up a bit or down, I mean. Okay. This is the rest of the comments here. Okay. Okay, so, overall, what I saw through this survey is, there are some areas where we're agreeing we're doing okay and we're on the same page, but there's also some wildly different areas where we are divided, right? And I guess I would say it sort of reflects our current reality of a board, right? Like we have division within the board. So to me, it's not that surprising that when we answer these questions of how we're doing, we're not exactly in sync with how we think we're doing and what we maybe should be doing, and reflected in some of the comments as well. If I think about just the questions I asked you to consider, is there anyone who would like to just bring up anything they would like to share on concerns about regarding our current governance practices? Like we saw some flavor of training and a desire to have training. Interested to hear from the group, if you have an overall comment about the survey or anything to do with our governance practices currently.
Yeah, for me, it is, I think, more of training, more webinars, basically about governance. That's the reason as soon as the email was sent out, I immediately signed up for all the webinars. And I'm going to faithfully attend all those. But if there's anything additional information, additional training through webinars, I'd definitely be interested. So.
Good to hear. When was that we had governance training? That was probably prior to Trustee Francis joining us, right?
Yeah, I think in our, if I may through you, Chair, in our first year, we did all of the modules of good governance, sort of the 18 modules that the OCSTA supports. I know they're focusing us on 5 or 6 of them this time, but there is a broad set of them that is always available for us to take. And so that is an additional learning to speak to Winston's sort of ask.
Do we all know how to do that? Like, have we done a good job of sharing that information out as to these governance trainings and modules? Tense, and then none offense to be taken to anyone who was chair. I'm just posing the question for discussion.
I think it would actually benefit almost anyone on this board who has not been on the governance committee at least once to spend 1 or 2 meetings in governance. And because we're going to be reviewing the bylaws next year, and that's going to start, I don't know when, I'm not in governance now, which makes me very happy. But I would strongly suggest anybody who's not been on governance to actually come to those bylaw meetings, to actually provide some input and also to learn more about them.
That's a great suggestion. Did you have something else, Trustee Francis?
Whenever they've had a governance meeting, I've always asked. In fact, I've asked Stephanie, and Stephanie said you're always welcome to come and participate. So I've done my best to try to come for this governance meeting, but if there's more, regularity or something, of course, any webinars, I'd definitely be interested in attending those.
Oh, Trustee Stanley.
Yeah, I'd like to see some more rotation of people between committees. I mean, I've been stuck on the same committees from the very beginning, and I never actually had any choice in those because I inherited them from the previous trustee who stepped down. So, it'd be great to have an opportunity to be on governance, to be on some other committees where I could have an opportunity to see and learn some new things on different committees. So that's just my thought.
Thank you for that. What about, what do you think that is going well? Is there any positive feedback that we might be able to speak to about our governance approach? Maybe someone on the governance committee could share a win, something that went well that came through there.
So I wasn't on governance, but I attended a couple as just an observer. And, I think the work that was done last year to update the bylaws was a huge win. I think we took a good step forward, and as Trustee Cuff said, we'll be doing that again next year. I do think that, those are good conversations. They're robust. And certainly do take feedback from the board, work through it at governance, and then bring it back to the board for decision. And so I feel that overall, the representatives on the governance committee had done a very good job over the last, couple of years in bringing things forward.
Thank you. Growth, what about growth opportunities? Anybody think of, we talked about governance as a potential area of growth. Are there other areas that we think we could grow in? Trustee Stanley.
I'd like to see more, I'm not sure how to even go about this, but a process of really having involvement with the long-term planning. Like, I feel that we're getting a little bit of that, just the beginning of that with the MYSP stuff. But before that, there was hardly any discussion about what we were going to be doing 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. And then a lot of the stuff that gets brought to us is just for final approval that we never had any say in. So, I mean, if we are really a strategic governance board, then we should be constantly talking about the future. And I just don't see that being done enough, you know. So.
Thank you for your feedback. Any other feedback that people wanted to share? Trustee Cuff?
Yeah, so I actually feel that sometimes community feedback is lacking because even right now, the presentation on the MYSP there, I know he's saying that we have another week or we have another 2 weeks to go, depending on if you listen to him or the email from that we actually sent out. But my concern is that we sometimes make consequential decisions on things and we haven't had actual community feedback, and a case in point was actually the roundabout for I think it was St. Benedict's. The only community feedback we got was 40 people from a school that I'm pretty sure has over 1,000 students in it and over 1,000 parents involved. So it's kind of I know you can't force the parents to actually communicate with us, and we can only go so far by sending a survey to them, and even that likely will not work all the time. So that is something that we do need to work on, and it should be up to the trustees also to try to come up with unique ways to try to get our communities to actually interact with the school board. It shouldn't be just expecting our director of education to, you know, put out a survey and all of a sudden magically 40 people are going to answer for 30,000 or however many we have in our system.
I would like to add on to that actually, because I was thinking about that myself, and I was thinking that we need to make more of an effort in regards to even reminding parents about the survey, because it doesn't, I don't know how much it costs us to use Newswire that we use all the time to talk about, you know, bake sales or whatever it may be. It wouldn't hurt to put in there, you know, hey, did you remember to fill out the MYSP survey? Maybe a few days before, remind them again, and on the last day, remind them one more time, and, you know, give a sense of urgency and say, have your say for your children's education. Because without that, I mean, I did, Tyrone requested me to say it in my greetings at the folk dancing festival, but many parents actually approached me and said that they couldn't understand anyone who was speaking on the microphone because it was echoey. You know what I mean? Even though I try to speak slow, even the other presenters. So I think we're missing a lot of opportunities that we have access to that we could easily do. And I do receive Newswire having a child in the system, and that's a missed opportunity.
Thank you for your feedback. Trustee Stanley.
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on what I was just talking about, I wonder if we can explore changing some of the actual nature of the committees that we're on. Like, we have the committees themselves. I mean, I know some of them are mandated by the ministry, but I'm curious how far back the ones that aren't. I'm not sure if we must have a couple that are mandated by the ministry, and pastoral is certainly one of them. But look at well, maybe we need to have more subcommittees where we can have a say in long-term, like we should have a long-term planning demographic committee. We could even, you know, bring that sustainability committee that we've heard about back into something that sort of a couple of us could be on. And I feel like the committee work isn't, and just to give away one of my answers there, I didn't rate our committee work as being that productive. I feel it's not that productive. And again, maybe it's the committees that I'm on, but I don't feel that it seems to make a lot of impact. And trustees are sort of there as almost ceremonial, sort of like the Governor General, to give a presence of being there. But I'm not sure what we even do on half of these committees, or what a lot of these committees even really accomplish in terms of the overall, you know, what effect do they really have on decision making? It seems, a lot of it seems ceremonial. So I'm just, and then this is not something, Chair Kraft, that you know, you can deal with overnight. It'd be a long-term thing we would do over a number of years, but just think about, maybe we can you could drop a couple of committees that don't seem to be doing that much and add a couple of new ones that get into that long-term planning mindset. Committees that could really give us opportunity to explore that. So just some thoughts I have.
Thank you for that. Director Dowling, do you know anything about the committees, and like, is that a mandated thing about the committees that we have, or?
Through you, Madam Chair, some of the committees are historical, some are mandated. So for example, Special Education Advisory Committee, Catholic Parent Involvement, which would be parent involvement in the Act. Those are mandated. Audit is mandated. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think of the committees off the top of my head. Governance is something that we would have to have as a policy governance board. I think it's important to keep in mind that as a policy governance board, it wouldn't be operational. And I saw it come out in some of the feedback that there's that fine line between what's operational and what's that 30,000 foot view. And so I think, just in hearing some of the things that were read in the evaluation tonight, and some of the comments or questions that would come up, and this goes to Trustee Cuff's comment, it's about that learning about that governance, and that, what does that 30,000 foot view look like? And I know that there are a few trustees around the table that wouldn't have participated in those first sessions with Marion Thompson Howell, and then even in the modules that we did subsequent to that. And one of the things that I've learned over and over is that just the work of governance is a lot of work to really determine what it looks like and how to operate that. So you see me typing some notes, because as I listen to this, I'm typing up notes because this assisted with the work plan in terms of PD suggestions to offer to the chair and the vice chair, and things to research. So that's what I'm typing up, notes on things that I'm hearing, to be able to assist with or make suggestions. Well, it'll be me at the end of the summer, but even for the incoming director, about how do we help trustees to understand that. And then the last thing I would say is that one of the things that we've tried to collect and make sure we have is the terms of reference. And I just heard Trustee Stanley talking about that. For what's the role of the committee to make sure that trustees are aware of what are the terms of reference for the committee that they're sitting on, and if we don't have them, or if we do have them, how do we update them and make sure that we review them at the beginning. And I know that Trustee Sikora, he and I spent some time talking about that, because he had requested that of me to try to make sure that every committee had that, and it was relevant. Sorry, I went a little bit further there, but
I think that's helpful information. Like that probably would help all of us if we knew exactly, like, terms of reference for every committee, what they're supposed to accomplish, and agree with that 100%. I know Trustee Weiler was going to share something.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to Trustee Stanley's comments, and I think, you know, each year at the beginning of the year in the school year in September, we decide what the work of the board will be in this particular year. And certainly looking at the various committees you know, their characteristics, what they're accountable for in terms of the terms of reference, even as a starting point, would be good to gather. And I know Trustee Zakura has done furthering that work a lot more, but I think gathering it and sharing it as a starting point would be kind of the first phase, and then probably the work of the board could be, do the committees meet all of our needs today, and asking ourselves that question, and really putting it into the work of the board for one of our years, if you will.
Trustee Sakura?
Yes, like regarding terms of reference, but I think one of the first committees I sat in on was SEAC, and, you know, can somebody approve the agenda? And I raised my hand and I was informed, no, you can't. And, you know, that's the first time I've ever sat on any committee where I wasn't able to have any input on things. So just having the terms of references would be a good thing. And, you know, I'd like them to line up with Robert's rules also, because, well, you have to do some special things to say you can't vote. And we do have the ability also, like we have, these are standing committees that we have. We can also strike ad hoc committees. So in, you know, the beginning of the year, if we find out we wanted to do something that is within our purview, we can have you know, an ad hoc committee to address that at some point during the year.
Okay, Trustee Stanley.
Yeah, just one follow-up comment to that. We have to remember that these committees were created by boards before us. There's nothing, unless they're required by the ministry, they're not sacred. We can change them. We can, particularly, we're supposed to have an innovative culture here, and I'm encouraging the board to start thinking that way too. Like, maybe some of these committees need to be updated. Maybe we need to look at whether it's making productive use of all of our time. Like, just to echo what Trustee Sakura said, I cannot vote on SEAC, I cannot vote on CPEC, and SAL, I'm basically there to just listen. So is that a productive use of my time as a trustee, being on 3 committees where I effectively have no say or decision-making power? That's a good question. So something to think about.
Oh, sure, Trustee Cuff.
I'm actually curious because you just mentioned SEAC, CPIC, and SAL, and these are all 3 mandated by the Ontario government. And I would like to know whether or not the Ontario government mandates that trustees cannot vote on it, or whether or not they can, or if the Ontario government just doesn't care, or rather doesn't have it written in the Education Act where they mandate these committees. If it's just our board making that decision, or if it's an actual Education Act decision. And I would like to know, if it's not in the Education Act, why can't we vote?
I don't have an answer to that. It's a good question for research. Chair, Trustee.
Yeah, I don't know the answer either, but I think it begs the question to gather all of our existing information first as a preliminary step so that we know our terms of reference. We can challenge some of those questions to see where we stand before we start, you know, thinking about where to go.
All I would say is I've written it down to just take away to do some research. I can tell you from having some of these committees under my purview as the director's designate in the previous board, it's not just Waterloo Catholic. So I'm going to use CPIC as an example, because the goal is to get away from that vote, but to get to consensus, to have that conversation. And so trustees are there to be able to provide input from the board table, and that, again, that 30,000 foot view, and to also hear from the members of those committees to be able to bring it back to the board table to share what they're hearing there as well. So I'll take that away and get back to you with those questions, those answers.
Sorry, just so you're saying that in the other board that that's the purpose of the trustee being there. And yet, for the CPIC in general, the person who reports on it isn't the person from us who's on CPIC. It is Judy, I believe, correct?
So through you, Madam Chair, the person who would report on CPIC at the end of the year would hopefully be the CPIC chair. That's the invitation. Superintendent Merkel would be there as my designate at that committee. So she'd be keeping me appraised of if there's anything going on in CPIC that I should be aware of or something that was unique. But you're right, there isn't a formal report that comes from trustees about it. But what I would hope, and I think this just goes to the terms of reference again, is that in conversation, folks at a committee of the whole could be talking about whether it was linkages or something else. Here's the things that I'm hearing, or here are things that are being expressed that I think we need to keep in mind as well. And as we know, at each of those meetings, trustees are asked to bring an update from the board about what's going on from the board level as well.
Trustee Phillips.
To Trustee Cuff's comment before about wanting to know a little, more answers, whether it's mandated or not. I mean, we know how it's been done. So as far as the research goes into that, we already know, but I would like that confirmation as well of whether it's, it's our board, is it something that the government wants us to do? Or, and if we can vote, why not? I'd like to know that as well. So I just wanted to say that. I think that was it for now. If I remember anything else, I'll say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for that discussion. In the interest of time, I just want to get to a couple of things that I think are really important for us to discuss as a group. So, in terms of that question, trustees deal with in-camera business appropriately and the confidentiality question. So respecting the confidentiality, we had two people who answered never. And we had a comment about confidentiality. I'd like to talk about this as a group. How are we feeling right now? I'm going to share that I've already shared it with you all in writing. I'm not feeling very good about this at all. We've had a breach of a confidential, privileged and confidential document that I now have to investigate. One of us in this room, excluding you, shared this document. It's a problem. I don't know what the other people who didn't complete this survey think about this, but how are we going to move forward as a board when we have confidentiality challenges? This is extremely serious. I need to hear from folks as to what we're going to do about this. Like, any suggestions, any comments, any feedback on Trustee Phillips?
I guess I'll start. It was brought to my attention that, oh, sorry.
Director Dowling just informed me, I have this, perhaps this is not the right forum for this discussion. I have this already in camera, so let's table this.
Sounds good.
I would like to move just to a final comment around experience. So how do trustees rate their overall experience on the board? Is there anything that people would like to share regarding their overall experience and things we might do better or that are going well that we haven't already shared? Trustee Weiler.
one of the things that we talked about in our pastoral meeting last month, I think, was trying to build more consensus around our discussions, because I think there's a lot that we do agree on. And so focusing from a strength-based approach, if we're thinking about bringing motions forward, and I mean, for all of us, if we can trust each other to sort of build some of that consensus or provide input before it comes to an agenda, then we can have some of the dialogue and discussion as a group versus out in the, you know, sort of out in the meeting. I just think that that was a good conversation that we had, and I'd like to try and see if there's opportunity to amplify that around our table. And yeah, I just think there's more that we agree than disagree, and I think that consensus would help all of us. You know, maybe experience a little less frustration, or feel that we've given input. So those are just a few comments, and I have not done that myself either, and so I think it's for everyone.
Thank you, Trustee Weiler. Anything else that anyone else would like to share? Trustee Sikora?
I think it might benefit us to just have a group meeting, in a sense, where we're not necessarily discussing board matters, but sort of how we're going to work as a board. You know, because that we're allowed to do that. I know we've had a lot of double in camera, triple in camera meetings this year. We're almost sick of board meetings, but I think something like that possibly in the start of the year might help. Just a thought.
Trustee Cuff?
Unrelated topic. It's 8:55 p.m. I believe we started at 6. So if we don't confirm decisions right now, then you're going to have a motion to extend.
Okay. Well, I think we are actually ready to move on. Thank you, Trustee Cuff. So 13.1, we had the upcoming meetings and events, which are listed. I'm not going to read those. Item 14.1, items for the next agenda. You can see those all listed there as well. I will move then to confirming decisions tonight.
Chair Cup?
Yes, thank you for, sorry about that. I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
It was moved by Trustee Weiler and seconded by Trustee Guerin that the agenda for Monday, May 12th, 2025 be now approved as amended, carried by consensus. It was moved by Trustee Stanley and seconded by Trustee Sikora that the Board of Trustees suspend item 411 of the WCDSB Board Operational and Procedural Bylaw for Trustee Doherty Masters in the matter of item 1.1.1 of the agenda, carried by consensus. It was moved by Trustee Sikora and seconded by Trustee Weiler that the consent agenda Board of Trustees and the recommendations contained therein be now approved, carried by consensus.
Okay. With that, I need a motion to move into double cam camera. Trustee Cuff, seconded by Trustee Francis. Consensus? Okay, thank you.